Welcome to the Off Central Podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Larry Kirk, and I'm joined today by my good friend, longtime friend, maybe a decade now, if I'm reading into it right.
It's getting there.
Pastor Jonathan Prothero.
Getting close.
It's so good. Yeah. It's getting close to 10 years, right?
I'm getting old.
Our friendship? Yeah. Well, I'm already old, so we're already there, buddy.
We're already there. Yeah.
Or I'm there.
This is coming up on 8 years now. It's getting there for sure.
There. Feels like a decade. Maybe it's longer. Maybe it feels longer than I anticipated. And I don't know is that a bad thing then?
Building the studio aged us.
Yeah.
Wow.
Being around each other.
Feels like 10 days.
It feels like 10 days.
It's like 10 weeks in your presence.
That's what I meant to say. Yeah. We're good. So we're in the final stages of the book of Colossians, and I think we have unpacked it probably the best that we could in that manner of time. As a church, we've never really, we've been through the books of the Bible, but we've highlighted things and not really been more chunks of verses at a time and then taking our time with it, you know?
Yeah, it's been a fun way to do it for sure. It's kind of more old school for me coming into that, what is technically known as expositional preaching, which is sort of line by line and looking at a few things. We haven't 100% done it like that, but it's been much closer.
Yeah, much closer
to that way. So we've taken our time with it, and I've really enjoyed just sitting in one book for 2 months now for a season.
Yeah.
I think so often as preachers and as professional Christians, we kind of get used to like, I've got my verse for the day and off we go.
Yeah.
And I know that story, but to just really
camp there,
put the brakes on, slow down, meditate on stuff, all the things that we tell people to do.
No, it's true.
But then practicing it as a community.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it, because I think a lot of times we're in a hurry to get on to the next thing in our culture to talk about or speak on or communicate, which is fine. It's those things are not. I'm not saying those things are not good. For those who are going to be listening to this outside of our church. But I am saying sometimes it's just good to pump the brakes, to sit in a book for a while and really unpack, in this case, what Paul was saying to the church of Colossae, and just peel back the pages a little deeper, a little more. And what I love about this too is that you get to see, when you take your time in a book, you get to see what he's saying in other writings that he had, and a lot of similarities, a lot of things that they were going through. All of those things were coming through that particular passage that touched on things in Galatians and Corinthians and some of the other writings that he had.
And Ephesians and the fruits of the Spirit.
Philippians as well.
It's all there, and he's dealing with similar issues of the heart. And I think also for us as well, I don't know about you, but I think preachers have this little bent towards going to scriptures that they kind of like, or themes that they like.
Sure.
But when you read a book, you have to deal with maybe passages.
Guilty as charged.
I'm not even aware of it half the time.
That's true.
You just have a natural inclination towards something. And so, this week I was tackling the second half of chapter 3, the household codes and rules and regulations. And like, slaves and masters wouldn't naturally be a scripture that I would go to sort of, to teach the church on, but it's there. And we have to deal with it, and we have to deal with it.
Because there were actually slaves and masters during that time.
That was his context. Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's really helpful to go through all of that as well for us and for the church, and to take it in a whole piecemeal, just like the church at Colossae would have received it.
Yeah. And I think slaves and masters, that portion of it even was, it's like, man, was there slaves? What is he trying to say to slaves and like, we should abolish slavery? No, I get that. We understand that. Yeah. It was just culturally that was acceptable during that time, and so he's trying to actually help the masters treat people with dignity, and treat them fairly. Yeah. So he's trying to move them, again, in that direction. And so, but what does that look like for us today? So if you're a business owner, I'm not saying you have slaves, but you have people that are working under you, right? And you should treat them fairly.
Yeah, exactly. And also, if you're an employee,
That's right.
Me as well. Yeah. He also challenges them. Look, right now you're in a situation where, yes, you are subordinate to a master, but I want you to understand that we're all subordinates to a greater master.
To a greater master.
So he reframes the whole paradigm and goes, look, all of us are doing work for Christ.
Yeah.
And so things will be corrected in the future, but I want you to see your work not as subordinate to an earthly master, but to a heavenly master.
The heavenly one, yeah.
Because we all have to answer to that. And so he doesn't, I tried to say he doesn't sow like rebellious seeds of like, let's have a riot, let's have an uproar, let's change the system immediately. Yeah. But he does sow the seeds of change.
Yes.
And it's the heart change that he's getting at for the masters and for the slaves as well.
Right.
And so those seeds of change are like mustard seeds that will eventually break down all of those barriers. Yeah. And so it's anyway, that was kind of one of the expositional things that we had to unpack.
I mean, when people read scripture, especially if they're newer to faith and they read things like that, what do you do with that then? And so I think addressing it, talking about it a little deeper, those kinds of things, and understanding context of the culture, and I think that those are things, and like you said, his whole thing was breaking down those things in what he's writing and what he's saying. And you also this past weekend you talked about submission.
Yeah.
Right? That word, submission.
Yeah, that
word. And how he shares that with husbands and wives in that context. And so,
well, it's like as you read the whole household conduct, it's like, wives submit to your husbands, but then as you go through the entire list, it's everybody submitting.
It's everybody.
Love is a form of submission and service. Kids in their obedience is a form of submission and service. Parents not being harsh with their children is a form of submission.
That's right.
And slaves understanding you're submitted, and masters that you're submitted to a greater power. The whole chapter, if you like, or the end of the chapter, it's all about this attitude of honor and respect that no matter where you are on the hierarchical scale, you're called to submit and serve one another.
That's right. No, I mean that, and I think he even says that in the book of Ephesians too, to the husband and wife too.
Submit to one another.
Submit to one another.
Yeah.
So he uses that same language in Ephesians, and I think when you're submitted, you're committed, right? I think that's not just a play on words, even though it is, but it's. When you're submitting to something, you're trusting someone.
Yes.
When I'm submitting my life to Christ, I may not always like what I'm hearing or what I'm reading in Scripture, even for my life. But I submit my life to it because it's the way of Christ. It's that way, and I'm going to trust Him that that's the better way. So if I'm going to submit my life to it, that means I'm going to be committed to it, and in that commitment comes this revolutionary change to how I view something, because there's moments where I don't want to be patient, but Scripture tells me to be patient.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna submit myself to that word. I'm gonna submit myself to the spirit of that.
Yeah. To trusting it.
To trusting it that's the best way to go about this moment.
Trust is such a key word, I think, there. I think submission minus trust equals subjugation.
Yeah.
Or submission without trust equals dominance. Because what's the driving force behind the submission?
Yeah.
Without trust, the driving force is fear of retribution, or if I'm submitted to you but I don't trust you, I'm only obeying out of a lack of I'm obeying out of fear.
Out of fear instead
and that becomes subjugation. That becomes a dominance. But when we submit with trust, that becomes true submission, where we're honoring one another and respecting one another because there's mutual respect and trust.
I think we find that in Christendom in general. Sometimes I think people are submitted or want to submit to Christ because it's really out of fear. out of fear of like what you just said, retribution of what God is going to do,
Yeah,
and that He's waiting. This cosmic, Zeus is waiting for you just and He's going to throw some lightning bolts at your way. You know?
For hundreds of years, that's how we won people to Christ. It was a fear-based submission, which turned into subjugation, and Paul's flipping it on his head. I think that's why, like in Colossians, one of the big themes as well is the supremacy of Christ.
Yeah.
Paul spends so long
time
setting up for us, like understanding like Christ at the center.
Centered.
Yeah,
centered. I don't know how many times you use that word.
That's it. And I think like the whole book is framed and only works when you put Christ at the center of everything. Yeah. And so that was kind of one of the key takeaways for me, that when we're talking about slaves or masters, very difficult to navigate because we're waiting for the condemnation of slavery.
Sure.
And Paul doesn't quite give us those nice words packaged in that way. But when we center everything around Christ, like submission to Christ, trusting Christ, Christ at the center of your marriage, Christ at the center of your parenthood, you know, everything becomes easier. Everything becomes more trustworthy. And so it's not this domination. But I don't know how you felt, but that was one of my key takeaways when it came to this book. And one of the things that I came back to is this sort of submission to Christ the whole time.
Yeah, I think that's, like you just talked about there, and what we unpacked the first 3 weeks or so, being Christ centered. Centered, and you could take that and just say, is he the center of my marriage? Is he the center of what I do in life? Is he the center of my being? Is he, is it always, am I putting him first in my life? Is he at the forefront, or is it something else? Is there things vying for that attention? Of course there is. There will always be, but making him the center and the supremacy of that. And the sovereignty that comes with that, and all of those things that are wrapped into the center, Christ being the center of your life. That to me, that was the main thing of the whole. And he goes into other things, but even in those other things, Christ has to be the center of your marriage, the center, of submitting to one another, and that, like we should be submitting to Him, and so it's for me it was really the supremacy, the center, that Christ is the center of our life, and allowing Him to be first in it, and that's the main, to me, was the main theme of it all.
Like Christianity is not just a self-improvement project. Because that's very much the self at the center. And whilst we want you to self-improve, that is a natural byproduct of faith and healthy spirituality, it's not really the goal as such. I think sometimes like we come to church because it's like, I want to,
be a better person.
I want to get my life right. I just want to be a better husband. All of that's great.
There's nothing wrong with that.
But the question is like, why do you want to be a better person? And so I think Jesus at the center gives us our why. And it gives us this constant foundation to come back to. And
he gives us the how, right? Paul's telling us the how. The how is make him the center. Right. What the big question for all of us today is, what was the first thing on your mind when you woke up, or what was the first thing in your hand when you woke up? Was it your phone, or was it okay, Christ, Lord, I'm going to submit my life to you. And listen, it may not be perfect after that. It's whatever, but you're starting that day with the focus on Him being the center and the supremacy of your life. Moving forward.
And the how, end of chapter 3 and chapter 4, Paul just drills down on such practical things. In chapter 4, he urges believers to be devoted to prayer. And he says, being watchful and thankful. And those are just like, those are doing things. Prayer is something you do. Being watchful is something you do, and being thankful is a motive of the heart, but it's something you have to say, or it's a posture. And it's very practical for us. And one of the things that was really highlighted for me in this book as well is Paul's urgency to rid your life of sin. He's like, die to the self. So there's this theme of putting on a new, or taking off the old and putting on the new. And at the end there, he says, be watchful. And just as a pastor nowadays, like as you pastorally help people Like, what are the things you wish people would be more observant or watchful or cautious of when it comes to their relationships with people? And yeah, we have to give thanks, or do you think it's just a lack of gratitude in people's hearts? Or what are some of the trends you're seeing in our culture here today that is like really things that the old self has to die to?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is what you just said, being grateful. When you find yourself starting to complain about something, and then you get a text that comes in, or an email that comes in, or a prayer request that comes in, and you read it and you're like, man, there's way more suffering than what I'm going through right now.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Just be
It puts everything in
grateful. It puts
perspective.
everything in perspective, right? And when you see that, and so I think a lot of times we're not great. We're not satisfied, and I don't really know where people can find. Well, I know where, but I think people don't have a sense of a grateful heart, or experiencing the joy of being content in the spot where they're in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's something else in them that's driving them. Like there's something more of this life, and it's usually not more of Christ. It's usually more of something.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, which never satisfies. The Bible tells us that. It's very clear about that. Those things will never satisfy. Right. And it's going back to what we talked about the last podcast too, I believe, was, it's when we're, put first things first, right? C.S. Lewis said, put first things first, which is putting Christ first in our life, and then he'll add all the other things to your life. But if you put those things first, you gain nothing in it all, because he's not first in your life. And so there's just things, because the second things, which is the secondary things, which all the things that will be added unto our life, is just things that are just going to waste away.
Right.
And you're going to be happy with it. It's like a new car. You're going to be happy with it just for a moment, and then all of a sudden it gets a scratch, it gets a dent, it gets French fries, it gets spilt milk in the back, the kids mess it up, it starts to smell, and you just and then you're not satisfied with it anymore, and so you're trying to move on to the next thing.
It's an epidemic of our consumerist, materialist Western culture, this discontented living.
And listen, I'm guilty.
Yeah.
We're not sitting here saying, we're not pointing a finger at people.
Yeah.
We're all guilty of this. Yeah.
It reminds me when Paul says, I've learned to abase, I've learned to abound, which is like, I've learned to live with nothing, I've learned to live with a lot.
That's right.
And his contentment level, I think, is what he's saying, isn't really shifted or moved
by one thing or the other.
By one thing or the other. He can be in prison, and it's difficult, but his contentment is still there.
Yep.
Or he can sit at the feet of Gamaliel where there's status, where there's security, and the contentment level is the same for him.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, that's such a poignant thing to point out in our culture and to be watchful for. Like, what is it? What is the discontent that you're living with in your heart? And would you say it's fair to say that every time we replace something at the center other than Jesus, that's when discontentment begins to sow in our hearts?
Totally.
So the car, we place that at the center of our focus, and this is what I'm driving for, or whatever.
I mean, I'll wrap myself out too, right? I don't mind being very transparent about it, because there was a moment where I just turned to Pearl one day and I said to her, I'm not making enough money. I'm just not making enough money.
Right.
But here's the driving force behind it. The driving force behind it was, there's something else that I wanted.
Right.
That was temporary.
Right.
Right. And again, it goes back to all the things that we experience in this life, which there's a lot of good things that come out of it, but there's a lot of bad things that come out of it. And you got to sift through it all. It's social media. It's the YouTube platforms. It's all the things that we consume and absorb, and not realizing we're absorbing the wrong things. It's almost like taking something where you're taking a vitamin and you're overtaking it, and you're absorbing it, which it's that part's good for you, the vitamin, but then you overdo it, and then it starts to become bad for you. Right.
And it's like taking 300 grams of protein a day. Like,
correct.
Well, are you using
it? Okay. Yeah. Are you using it? And, because your gums are going to recede and everything else is going to happen to you when you're consuming that much protein. But yeah, it's good for you, but you're overabsorbed into it, and you've allowed that to shift something in your heart. And so I think those are things sometimes that creeps into our life that we don't realize. And that's why and my wife called me out and was like, Larry, I went, you're right. Before she even finished it, before she even finished I was like, you're right.
So it was a moment.
That's a dumb moment.
It was a blip.
Just a dumb moment, sure. And I think we all have that. And the problem with that, John, is we have to, when you said be watchful, that's the part of being watchful in that moment. Like, nope, you're right. I see it too. Never mind.
Yeah. That's why community is also helpful.
That's not of the Lord. Yeah. That's not of God.
Right.
That's flesh. That's self.
Yeah.
That's sin.
Yeah.
Nature.
Yeah. It's hard, isn't it? Yeah. It's like contentment comes not from having your wants met, but from wanting less.
Yeah.
And it's not being driven.
That's right.
The slave drivers that we have, the love of money, because the money is the access to what we think all of our wants are.
Yeah.
But not everything we want is helpful for us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is, I'm typically a person that's very grateful for what God's done in my life. Typically, it was just that moment. It was a moment that I had.
Well, that's what he pairs it with, is watchfulness with gratefulness.
That's right. Yeah.
You got to watch the things that are tugging on your heart.
Yeah.
And one of the ways to do that is to be grateful for the things that are already provided in your hands here and now,
regardless of your situation. Right. Paul's grateful even in chains.
Yeah. Yeah. He was grateful that he just had the opportunity to write.
Yeah.
And that he had, even that he says, everyone's abandoned me and forgotten about me except for you. And it's those few people that he's still grateful for. It's amazing.
Yeah. How many people forgot to kind of set him to the side a little bit? Yeah. He's in prison.
His reputation's not great. Yeah. Or they removed themselves for whatever reason.
But he was grateful for the ones that stuck with him, was faithful to him.
Yeah.
His friendships,
when he had every right to bemoan and be pretty bitter.
Complain.
I'd be pretty annoyed if all my friends abandoned me in my time of need.
In your time of need.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, you've experienced some of that.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly.
To be fair, I don't want to bring that up, but you did experience a little bit of that. But
people kind of distancing themselves, particularly when you need them.
And again, not knowing how to respond to situations, but people can be people. But
I'm so grateful and past that. But I mean, as we're coming near the end of our time, but is there anything else in your heart, like when it comes to Colossians, or we've kind of wrapped this up now. By the time this comes out, we'll have gone through all 4 chapters, and we've talked about the supremacy of Christ and dying to the old self and putting on the new, and this new ethic and way of living life. I mean, there may not be much more really than those themes. Is there anything else in there that you want to leave people
one of the
with?
things that you'll probably hear, that you've probably already heard by this time too, but the things he says there in chapter 4, be wise, and this is verse 5, be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity, and let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. And I think it's particularly in our culture, we don't do that well. And I'll use a reference that most people will know when they hear this. We act like Karens sometime toward people.
Yeah.
And because they've ticked you off, or because they've made you upset, or so in response to that, or just piling on a situation with some particular thing that's going on, and you're just piling on and picking sides and choosing sides in that, and we say whatever. And I think it's an emotional response instead of a spiritual one, seasoned with salt, our conversations.
Yeah. Right.
And particularly how we listen, we never want to say things or be in a moment where, I remember the story, a pastor said one time, and he was a music pastor, and I don't want to say his name out loud, but he was driving, and someone cut him off like big time, like slammed on the brakes, screeched, and he got mad. He drove by him and flipped him off, just gave him the middle finger, right? And so he's going to church.
Oh no, they didn't both pull in, did they?
They did. They did. And it was a person that goes to the church. Oh gosh. Right? And it was that moment. And I'm not saying that's exactly what Paul's saying here, but it's a part of what Paul's saying. Yeah, that we got to be careful. Like our life should be, like he says, always full of grace.
That for me was the line, because I think in our culture, sorry to interrupt your
flow, go ahead,
here, but like in our culture, we want to, I think people tout truth as the most important thing. I just want to be truthful. But Paul's like, actually, the most important thing is it needs to be full of grace.
Yes.
The way that you are trying to present yourself to people is actually really important, because it opens up doorways and pathways for the gospel to be shared.
Yeah.
But sometimes our discourse shuts doors, right?
Yeah.
And so full of grace.
Yeah.
Like that's the word he uses.
Yeah, because if you're in a moment where you legitimately and really, how could I say this? You have the right to actually say some of the things,
right?
But that's not the spirit behind it. Is no, because God's heart in every situation, the people that nailed him on the cross, the people that were gambling for his cloak, the people that put the crown of thorns on his head, that beat him with a whip, he actually died for them and was full of grace in that moment for them and loved them enough to do that, Father, to allow them to do that. Father, forgive them. Yeah, exactly. And so that's the kind of grace he's talking about here. Paul's talking about, use even if it is truthful, that what you would say would be true. Yeah. It's not this. You didn't do it in grace. You didn't do it with a heart, the spirit behind it of restoration and restoring someone. You're doing it because it's elevating you and making you feel better about you, because you're never going to do that, right? You're not going to act that way or whatever, or they deserve that, right? And so I think a lot of that is that particular passage of Scripture really stood out to me in that last part, that how we act toward those who are outside the faith, even, I guess that's what he's referring to here a little bit, just outsiders. Let it be seasoned with salt and grace. Right. How we treat others. Even when you're right. I mean,
again, to the story, reckless driving is really dangerous. And put people's lives at risk. There's money involved in insurance, and it's sort of self-centeredness. People will just move out my way. There's a lack of responsibility there. So in some sense, he's right in his anger towards all of those signs.
And he could have been, he just didn't need to respond.
It's truthful. What you're doing is you're responding to somebody who's, ignoring, good, healthy wisdom. But Paul would say, hey, was that your most gracious moment? To which he would probably say, yeah, maybe not.
Just think about if you pulled around and then was angry, but pulled around and got in the parking lot, and then the person came and it's like, and then you could have the conversation right?
Hey, I love you, man. You need to be a little bit more aware.
And avoided all this embarrassment.
Exactly. So he probably had his tails in between his legs as he went up.
And now, now, and I believe that's what Paul's saying too. Now you've ruined your right to speak into their life.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
By how you've acted. So
that's great. So being wise and being full of grace. I just love that. What a great book we've been through. And, I hope if you're watching this, or if you've been a part of our congregation, if you haven't yet read the book, it's 4 chapters. Like, what does it take? 25, 15 minutes? Depends how fast you are. You take it slow. It's about 20 minutes to get through. 5 minutes a chapter, if that. And it's just full of so much practical advice and wisdom for us.
Pretty powerful. Pretty powerful stuff. You want to take us out?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, well, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching us on YouTube, click like and subscribe. That helps us with the AI algorithms that seem to be taking over our worlds and our lives at the moment.
It's another conversation.
That's going to be a whole nother conversation. But if you're listening to us on one of the other platforms, go ahead and click 5 stars. We would super appreciate that. But even if you don't, thank you so much just for tuning in. and for listening. We hope that this in some way has enriched your life. God bless.